The connection between controlling parents and finding yourself stuck in an abusive relationship. Someone will probably be uncomfortable and angry about this topic. That's fine. And is this based on any widespread psychological study? No. This is based upon personal experience across hundreds of cases. Okay? So one person's opinion, casting it out on the internet. If it resonates with you and it's useful and helpful, great. Keep listening. If it's not, if that sets you off right away, then find another video. That's okay. So this is the pattern that I have observed many times. And that is a person, man or woman, that is reaching out to me, seeking help. They are in a relationship, arguably enmeshed into a relationship that is clearly not working for them, is clearly dysfunctional, toxic on many levels. They are not happy with it. Nobody's really happy with it. They feel activated and stressed basically all the time. They almost always will voluntarily describe physiological problems like digestive problems, sleep problems, loss of appetite. Big one, loss of any kind of sex drive. Gaining weight, mental problems, rumination, can't focus at work, threatening to lose their job. A constant strain on their mental and emotional well-being. I've heard people describe the idea that going home from like work is an escape, and the idea of going home and walking through that door is something that is such a burden that they basically pull up in their car and they sit there in their car for 10, 15, 20 minutes trying to psych themselves up to walk through that door into their home environment. That is not a good situation. There's no aspect of that situation that is good, I guess, unless you're doing like very serious crucible training on high stress environments. Maybe that's the only way I could possibly justify that. But for all the rest of us, that situation sucks, right? We don't want that. We don't want to deal with it. We wouldn't wish it on anybody. But we're stuck in it. And this person is reaching out to me and they feel stuck in it. And they're like, what do I do? How do I get here? Why do I put up with this? How did I pick this person? What is happening inside me that got me to the place that this is my reality? And oftentimes, in fact, I would say the majority of the time, when we investigate past relationships, we find out that this same dynamic happened before. It looks different, smells a little bit different. It's basically a different color, but the same principles and the same emotional dysregulation of the dynamic is still present. Now, we all kind of go in like looping relationship patterns. That's what I talk about here all the time. But this one is particularly important because it has such a heavy negative impact on such a wide net of people. Both individuals in the relationship, any children in that dynamic are going to be negatively impacted in significant ways. And it usually spreads out to basically every person that touches any of those people, because those people are going to be stressed out, tapped out, highly reactive. Survival strategies are going to be flaring all the time. There's going to be a lot of emotional volatility or sadness or depression or any of that stuff, right? So it's like this little core is radiating outward in difficult ways, right? Just ways that make life difficult for everybody around. Now, difficulty isn't necessarily bad, right? We don't want to demonize difficulty. But in this situation, we're going to say this is not a way of utilizing difficulty in forward advancement. This is basically being stuck, addicted maybe, like trapped in a situation that is super heavy and super just depressing, usually for everybody involved. Okay, in that dynamic, there's a lot of different dynamics that can get us to this thing that I've just described, but I'm talking specifically about the one where the partner is very critical. The partner is controlling. The partner has huge emotional outbursts if you cross the line. If there's some little path of acceptable behavior, some little razor blade path of what they think is the correct way to do stuff. And if you step out of that line, there's a huge negative consequence, right? They will blow up, they will shout, they will yell, they'll throw things, they get abusive, whatever, right? There's a bunch of different ways that it shows up. And all of them are basically, like if we were watching a movie and you saw one character behaving towards another character in that way, we would be like, that guy's an asshole. That woman is out of line. Or an asshole also, right? Like we would see that dynamic and say that's unacceptable. Maybe we would even judge it as being evil or mentally unstable or broken or whatever, right? Point is, we would judge it. We would say that's not good, it's not acceptable, and it would be basically being portrayed as that person being the oppressor or the villain. Of course, is why the internet explodes with victim language all the time, right? Now, people will see that on the movie screen and make that assessment and say, this is clearly not acceptable. And then go home and then deal with different flavors of that same kind of abuse, or a lot of people would call this disrespect, and they kind of tolerate it. And if we take this question and put it right in their face, they don't have an answer for it. Like, I don't know. Or I'm just so scared to leave. Or I'm terrified of being alone. Or what would the future be, right? This is a time to mention another video I shot once that was like, in general, the brain prefers that which is predictable, even though it's hell, over that which is unpredictable, even though it might be filled with potential for something better. Not always, but enough that it dominates people's lives. And this is one of those cases, right? So here's these people, and they're coming to talk to me, and they're asking all these questions, and they're trying to understand their own reasoning and why they do the things they do, and help me gain enough confidence to exit this situation, which I do, and encourage them to find friends and supported networks that will assist in that. But there's this underlying theme, which is really the topic of this video and why I chose the title. Who would you be if all the fear, anxiety, and chattering thoughts finally went quiet?
Many people in daily lives, they are just holding themselves back.
And I looked up yoga retreats and all these different things, but nothing quite resonated.
Honestly, I didn't think about it. Just like, I'm going.
Felt like every emotions from every person was valid here.
Allow yourself to be fully yourself.
I think it was a contained environment where you could freely express yourself.
That's a big lesson. It's okay to get close to people. It's okay to share. It's okay to be vulnerable.
And no one will shame whatever feeling you feel. Nobody makes it bad or wrong or even uncomfortable.
They added more than it would have been one-on-one.
Don't be afraid. Don't worry about the money. It's totally worth it.
I did not have the capability of stating my needs and boundaries and possibly disappointing somebody. But in this moment, I could.
And there's this theme when I am discussing with these people and asking about their relationship past and their family dynamics and everything else. And we virtually always get to a point where here's this person making descriptions about one or both of their parents. And the description sounds something like they were critical all the time. They're always yelling. The demands were high. I didn't have freedom. I couldn't go out with my friends. I would, typical scene from a movie. I come down wearing some outfit that I think is cute, and this parent just lays into me with, shame and accusation and assault and, offensive language. And I feel so destroyed. Of course, I go back up to my room and I change my outfit, and then whatever it was, it goes in the trash or goes in the back of the closet, never to be worn again. Yeah. The controlling parent. This is a theme that is extremely common. Oh my God, so common and so tragic, because I'm quite certain that in most cases, the parents that behave in this way are not actually wanting to just drop shame bombs and litter their child's psyche with, psychological and emotional trauma for the whole rest of their life. I'm pretty sure that's not their goal. But yet that's kind of what happens often. Not always, but often enough that we have a whole industry and this channel and everything else that is based upon that, recovering from that situation. So we have these people that spend their earliest years going through this situation where you have one or both parents in a situation where they're extremely controlling. They are quick to anger. They blow up with high emotional intensity. There's usually a tremendous amount of criticism, shame, guilt, and emotional manipulation involved because they are trying to control their environment, right? What do we know about people that try to control their environment? Fear. The prime motivator for control is always fear. Fear of the consequences if I don't control this. Fear is the opposite of vulnerability. Vulnerability creates emotional connection. Vulnerability creates emotional availability. Vulnerability creates attunement and support while dysregulated and express delight and support for autonomy and ultimately safety. Vulnerability creates safety. Control, well, when you're on the receiving end of it. So if you are trapped in a situation where another human being is acting on their fear response and trying to meticulously control every aspect of the reality, the things they see, their environment, the people around them, how those people act, behave, look, etc., 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 and you're trapped with this person, shame is almost always the thing that arises. Because what that person is, the message they're sending you constantly is that you're wrong. And you will only be right if you walk this little razor blade. You will only be approved of if you walk this little razor blade. You will only get love, attention, validation, approval, celebration of the tribe, family, relationship, whatever. That will only happen if you do the things that I tell you to do. Now, people that utilize this strategy hate being called out on it because lack of control, duh, right? And usually they will push back and say, what are you talking about? That's not how it works. Children need structure. They need to have an environment that is predictable. And the way that I meticulously control the whole environment, that's the way that I'm creating safety for that person. Okay, let's look at that. Because there's a lot of evidence that does suggest that children are going to thrive in an environment where they have some semblance of, the predictability is high association with safety, right? So a structured environment that has regular times that you meet for lunch, or, the kind of milk you drink, or the kind of exercise you do, or whatever, predictability and certainty have high associations with felt safety. I know what's going to happen next. And because I know what's going to come in the future, I don't need to worry about it. I can turn off my vigilance. I don't have to be watchful. I don't have to be defensive. I can work with this within the system that I know is happening. This is true. This is a situation where basically every human nervous system is going to thrive in that environment to a point. Now, there's a point where they stop thriving in that environment because that environment feels controlling. Because what happens is we are in this dance. It is not entirely about certainty. It is not entirely about predictability and safety. There's also this need we have for novelty. And this is a fundamental aspect of being human, is that we explore, we go out, like we look at this environment around us that is familiar and been the same forever. And there's this compulsion that arises inside that says, I want to know what's across the stream. I want to know what's on the other side of the mountain. I want to know what's at the top of the mountain. I want to know what's at the bottom of the ocean, right? I want to know what's in outer space. It seems to be an aspect of the human psyche organic system that we have this fundamental craving inside to go explore, and that is what basically allows us to expand. And as expand, we thrive as a species. We basically expand and adapt and then dominate and then, subjugate everything around us. That seems to be the key trait of the human species and why we're the dominant force on Earth, basically. So this exists also, right? We do have a situation where structure is awesome, and structure helps us feel safe. Structure helps us feel predictable. There's also this element where it's like, I have a craving, I have a desire inside to see other things, to be exposed to experiences and forces and people and language and everything else that is different than what I know, because when that happens, my brain expands and I learn new things. And when I learn the new things, I put stuff in perspective, and then I'm continually doing this basically through every moment of my life. And I'm constantly learning, reshaping, refactoring, etc., right? Well, someone that is afraid of difference, someone who is operating from a fear-based response to the world and using control as a way of trying to create safety for their own brain, nervous system, whatever, they're going to hate that. They're going to hate the idea that you are exploring something that they don't know. They're going to hate the idea that you do something different than what they say is correct or right. And that creates a fundamental tension. I mean, this tension goes back as long as we have history. This is the human condition. This is children grow and then they want to explore. And the parents are like, don't explore over there. That's a dangerous place. That's where all the bad people live. And then the child goes and explores over there. And sometimes it is bad people. But other times it's just another tribe that's just like us. They love their children. They eat food. They, get scared in the dark and everything else. They're literally just like us. At one point in time, quick story time, I spent years living in a great big city, Istanbul. I love that city. But Istanbul is it's a gigantic city, but it is basically structured with like these little neighborhoods, a bunch of neighborhoods next to each other. And at one point in time, I started, and you go around by like public transit and stuff, so you basically drive through all the other neighborhoods, right? But at one point in time, I said, it's a nice day. I'm just going to go walking, and I'm going to go walking down paths I'd never walked before. And I started my little village, my little neighborhood, had a name and everything. And I'm on my way out, and I talked to one of the guys that lives there, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to walk south and go through all the stuff. And he's like, oh, don't go there. That's where all the, they're criminals and they're dangerous. And are you sure I don't think you want to do that. Like, you should, why don't you get a taxi? I'm like, well, it's the middle of the day. I'm a big guy. Like, I'll figure it out. And I walk in the next village, and it's lovely. And it's wonderful people, just like the ones from my own village. I'm just, hanging out, chatting, da-da-da. Then I go to the next one, and I stop for lunch, and they ask me, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing this thing. They're like, you don't want to go to the next one because they're all full of criminals and bad people and everything else. And I'm like, do you guys have some kind of script that you're reading? Like, what? And I kept doing this all day. And I think I went through 13 or 14 of these like villages. And almost every single village, someone basically pointed to the next one over and said, you don't want to go there because they're not like us. They're bad people are over there. And it was definitely a learning experience for me, because I realized how common this is in human living, is that we have our little space of control, we have a little space of predictability, and we say this is safe, and anything that's outside of this is not safe. And what do? We take the people we care about or the things we care about, because oftentimes to a controlling parent, the child is really nothing but an objectified thing. Not always, but enough that it is tragic and we can talk about it, and people who are in that situation know what I'm saying. So people take the stuff that they care about, the places where they don't want to lose control, and then they basically try to make sure that those things can't leave. They can't be different. They can't go anywhere else, right? So now we've got this whole dynamic of the controlling parent operating from fear and using control as their primary strategy to make sure that they don't have to face any discomfort. And then children come into this mix and they're like, well, it's my responsibility to keep them safe and blah, blah, blah. And they come out, a whole list of justifications that are completely misaligned with 50 years of research we have on attachment theory. I get in this argument with people every once in a while, and they'll go blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, where'd you learn that? And they're like, well, I just know, or my parents, or everybody knows that, or whatever. I'm like, dude, we literally have 50 years of research that says the opposite. And if you can't metabolize that, if you can't ingest the conclusions of this research and understand what it means, don't know what to tell you. And it's not just research in the sense of like, we've got these ideas and it's a bunch of academics sitting around at some chalkboard, coughing chalk dust and writing equations on the board. It's not that. It's people that have like literally been out in the field doing longitudinal studies, watching children from birth, basically, go through many, many, many years and watching the different attachment dynamics along the way and say, it's pretty damn conclusive. People that get this kind of treatment go that direction and it's super awesome and they're happy and cost of education is lower and their annual, lifetime earned income is higher and their relationship satisfaction is higher. Like everything's better over there. And everything over here in the classical model that the controlling people are so, embraced with and meshed with, whatever, the data from that system is not positive. Right? Sure, there's outliers. Like, sure, you can get someone like a super controlling parent that basically comes out and it's like, I got to control every aspect of my life. And they work out like crazy and they just go completely mad in education. And then they go get some high paying job. And then they build this whole career and, find a wife or husband or whatever. And they have kids and get some fancy apartment or whatever. And what do we have? Let's look. We have someone who has all the trappings of a successful life. Money, maybe power, maybe stuff, maybe social status, right? Great, awesome. Now let's go inside their head and be like, are they in therapy? Are they talking to someone like me or any other coach or therapist out there in the world because they're fundamentally dissatisfied with their life? What's the quality of their relationship? Is it filled with like softness and vulnerability and connection and acceptance? Or is their primary relationship in their life radiating the sense of controlling, fear-based reactivity? We don't know. We got to go look. I've talked to some of these people. I've talked to people that are tremendously successful financially, social status, everything else. And inside it's a wreck because they don't know what to do. Their emotional experience is mired with difficulty, uncertainty, anxiety. And I'm sure there's ones that are doing great also, right? And they don't talk to me. So, I don't have experience in that. But I do know that they exist. But let's loop back around. What does this have to do with the controlling parent and the abusive relationship? Do you not see it yet? I'm going to guess that people who watch all my videos probably see it already. It's so clear, right? If I'm a child and I'm raised in a situation where all, or at least the major dominant attachment figures in my life are doing this like explosive negative reaction, if I deviate from the razor's blade edge of correct behavior, my whole nervous system optimizes around that. And the way it optimizes is intense critical self-judgment and completely disproportionate prioritization of what other people think of me. Specifically, anyone who's confident or controlling I get around someone who walks around with this like big puffy chest and they say, oh yeah, I got my life in order and I'm the boss and I'm alpha male or whatever bullshit. And they walk around with this like confidence and they use control as a way of manipulating their environment into their comfort zone. And you were raised around parents that do that. And then you meet one of these people as an adult. You're just like, they got their shit together. This feels normal. This feels exciting. This is what love feels like. And then there's the next bit, which is I've got all these wounds inside of not being accepted and not being cared for or cherished because I was being controlled all the time. And maybe this guy, gal, whatever, whoever, if I can get them to come, like the idea of them loving me, the idea of them prioritizing me for a minute and actually telling me that I'm okay, that I'm desirable, that I'm wanted, chosen, prioritized, right? If the idea that that could happen from someone who's basically a carbon copy of mom or dad is so euphorically compulsive for our nervous system that our attraction system will just like go zoo, right? And it's like you'll become completely enamored with this person because your attachment system is trying to close the loop. They think this person could answer the wound. This person could bring the sensation of wanted, chosen, and prioritized from someone that is just like mom or dad, the controlling one. So we look at them and we say, oh, they're so confident. Oh, I wish I was confident like that. You're not confident like that because you were literally trapped in an entire upbringing and brain optimization cycles around someone that basically said, you're not good enough, right? That's why our confidence is so negatively impacted. Okay, so I wish I was confident like that. I see them with confidence and I see the way they navigate through the world and the way they like control things and the way they have the right answer and the way that they judge and berate people. And it's like, oh, they're so strong until the honeymoon wears off. And then once the honeymoon wears off, you're profoundly attached to someone who is controlling, manipulative, driven by fear and insecurity, and just a whole host of negative behavior traits, like a whole host of life strategies and emotional responses that are just going to make everything difficult, ugly, painful, depressing, and unfortunately, sometimes abusive. So there is a direct connection. In my mind, you can disagree with me, that's fine. In my mind, there's a direct, like straight line connection between I was raised with critical, controlling parents that use shame as a weapon to manage my behavior, looks, voice, whatever. From there, there's a straight line connection that basically prepares me, grooms me. Ooh, yeah, we'll use nasty language, provocative language. It grooms me to be someone who is not only susceptible to walking into a relationship with an abusive partner, but it makes that dynamic more attractive than the alternatives. And this is a big claim. I get that. And it's just what I've observed. It's a pattern I've seen. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I see how that fits together. Wow, that's crazy. And the second time, and third time, and fourth time, and fifth time. Now, I might be not seeing things correctly. And my data set might be way too small and skewed in some direction and whatever, right? So like this might be an aspect of like, the pool in which I'm seeing these patterns is like, some little tiny offset from the big picture, and I'm just myopic. Might be happening, but then again, one of the super interesting things about attachment theory, at least the way that I teach it, is how incredibly predictive it is. And so that would say I could walk down the street in any big city and then basically, interview people one person at a time, and then, until I find someone that would, assess their relationship as physically or emotionally abusive. And then be like, okay, let's talk about your childhood. Let's talk about your parents. What's your mom like? What's your dad like? What's your earliest memories with them? How much fear shows up in your nervous system when I say the word punishment? When we imagine that face that you just saw, bringing in the punishment storm. And you can just watch their nervous system activate. They're just like, ugh, right? The skin will crawl. They'll take a breath. The pupils will dilate. Like, you see a whole host of physiological reactions. And this is a 40-year-old adult walking down Saks Fifth Avenue in New York City, like on his way to work, right? This is not like some kind of, I don't know, therapeutic setting. This is so predictable, or so predictive, however you want to say that, right? Now we flip this the other way. It's just like walk down a different street, go to some other city, walk down the street, interview people until you find someone that has a parent that they would describe as like critical, controlling, weaponized shame, etc. These other things I'm talking about. We'll go down the street until we find someone that says that and just be like, okay, now tell me about your last 3 relationships. And you will hear the same story virtually always, not always, but virtually always, enough that we talk about it. And the story will be like, stuck in this thing and it really wasn't working well. And when I went in the front door, I thought this person was like this. And then of course it began to degrade. And, you know, I'm going to take ownership for my part in creating that relationship. But that other person was blah, 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 blah. And you'll be fear oriented and controlling and, you know, a whole host of like reactive mechanisms. So now keep in mind, controlling, this just came into my brain. Controlling also includes isolation, because isolation is fundamentally a strategy to achieve control of your environment. So sometimes the controlling nature of that person is not so much they're trying to control me, although that's the majority case. Sometimes it is just like they're trying to control their environment. And it's like, I didn't like some neighborhood dinner event and I had some conversation with Betsy over the Jell-O pudding and I didn't feel good afterwards. And now that person is spinning about it and they're ruminating. They're basically emotionally dysregulated. And then they go home and they shut down. They turn to an attachment zombie, like all their emotional presence and attachment-oriented dynamics basically go completely offline. And they're going to be wandering around the house, or they slam themselves, you know, they close themselves up in a bedroom or something. They stop reacting. They isolate, right? These are all strategies for basically achieving total dominant control over my environment so I don't have to face any discomfort. And guess what happens if you're the other person living in the house with that one, right? You feel cut off. You feel disconnected. You feel confused. You feel rejected. You feel abandoned. Yes, it feels like that. And, you know, from a kind of rational assessment of emotional interactions and people living together, you know, it's kind of, yeah, they did reject you. They have abandoned you for some period of time while they sort through their stuff. Now, they're allowed to do that. They're adults. They're processing their shit. We don't want to shame that or make demands that they do or that they be any different than the way they are. But this is on the softer side of the control. Now, if we're on the sharper side of control, you come home from that same discussion with Betsy about the chocolate pudding, and then that person goes into this rage of, you know, berating and shouting and angry and just super activated. And then it radiates out from there. It's not about Betsy anymore. Is that they're screaming at the kids. They're screaming at you. They're throwing shit across the room. They're like breaking stuff. It turns into just a dumpster fire. And those people, the ones receiving that, those are the ones that reach out to me. And they're just like, this is terrible. And I feel stuck here. And I just can't leave. And I don't know why. And it's like, I know this is a mess, but I can't talk to my partner about it, because if I talk to my partner about it, they're going to rage out. So I basically numb out all the time. You know, I'm kind of just, I take care of the kids. I butter the sandwiches. I go to the movies when they want to go. I'll sit down and watch TV when people want to watch TV. And I just don't, I'm a shell of a human being. I don't talk about anything. I don't express opinions. I just go along. Raise your hand if you've ever seen somebody like this. It's usually the wife, more than 50%, but at least that I've seen. But it can also be the other side. You've got one aspect of the partnership. We're talking in public, like at the dinner party where there's the chocolate pudding, right? In public, the couple is there. So one person is like dominant, clearly opinionated, critical, and controlling. And the other person is basically walking around like a robot. Yeah, whatever you say, Sally. Okay, dear. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so. Yeah, watch them drop something. And the way that they spin out of control and this like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Where'd they learn that? From the critical parent. Almost always. I can't think of a case where they learned it anywhere else. I mean, it's like the earliest programming into the brain. So what do we do about this, right? What do we do about a situation where you begin to come to terms with the idea that like the way your parents navigated the world was probably fear-based and controlling, and that all of that had a consequence on the way that your nervous system developed, the way it developed around your confidence, the way it developed around your ability to set boundaries, the way it developed around what you find attractive, what you'll tolerate, bad situations that you will keep tolerating, even though they're clearly misaligned and bordering on dangerous. What do we do? And this is extremely difficult. This is a high skill situation. Now, what a lot of people do is they tolerate and they keep tolerating and they make excuses. And then they go to the gym and they do therapy, or maybe they do, maybe they don't, whatever. But they find different ways to survive until they can't take anymore, and then it blows, right? Their emotional pressure bottle fills up, and then they just, I can't do this anymore, and then they run away. And that seems to be the way most people do it, because they don't, I mean, it's basically like you're low skill. This is not a judgment or indictment. It's just like you don't have these skills yet because nobody taught them to you. So low skill, but the system, the resentment and inner stress inside the system keeps building. The emotional pressure bottle keeps pressurizing. And eventually the system says, I need to equalize, and I will take drastic measures to do that. And then they run away. Okay, now let's go interview 100 of these people that have run away and done that situation. What's the most common thing you're going to hear from that person? Well, I mean, other than it sucked and they were terrible and all that kind of stuff, that probably the most common thing you will hear in those discussion groups where those people are talking freely is, I regret not doing it sooner. I've probably heard that 1,000 times from 1,000 different people. And that's interesting. That tells us something. Because how often do we hear the one that's like, oh, I regret leaving? Never. Not once. Right? We'll hear things like, I wish I'd done this differently, or I wish I'd done that differently, or I wish I'd like taken care of this thing before it happened so that I would be, I'd have some financial security here, or take care of the kids in this way or that way or whatever. But like, we don't ever hear that. What we hear is, I regret not doing it sooner. And so what we're seeing, or a way of interpreting what we're seeing, is that people that pull the pin and they get the escape, they hit the eject button, right? And then they're out, and then they're spinning in the uncertainty of this future. They land, they find a way. They get to a life where things are better. And then they're thankful that they did it. And they regret not doing it even sooner. They're like, it's like when you're on the inside, everything else seems scary, and you don't want to pull the eject lever yet because you don't know where you're going to land. And you're just like, how am I going to do this? But then we've got hundreds and thousands of people that have done exactly that. They did the thing you're afraid of doing. And now they're speaking back to us from the future and saying, it's okay. You'll find a way. Like you will land in a place where you are happier. Because look at all the rest of us. There's an entire tribe of us who have been where you are. We pulled that eject lever in desperation, not with a plan. And then we landed, and we're in a better place now. So that's one way of facing this difficulty. You're in a relationship that is fundamentally manipulative, abusive, emotionally burdensome, whatever, and you're afraid of the future. Eject, right? Now, what else can we do about it? I mean, that one's pretty extreme, right? What else can we do? And again, it's a high skill situation. It's a high skill because you need the ability to hold yourself steady, even though you've got big uncomfortable emotions just surging through your system and saying run or fight or shut up, be quiet, make yourself small, whatever. You're going to have all these big emotions inside your system telling you to be a certain way, and you got to hold that, not suppress it, not numb it out. You just got to hold it and say, I hear you, but we're not going to do that because mommy or daddy's in charge right now. Mommy or daddy, adult brain. And we're going to do something that actually helps us build our future. And so what does that person do? While they start preparing for the exit, they start lining things up, different friends they can rely on, different places they can land, different jobs they can apply for, like family connections, whatever, right? Hopefully some or all of these are accessible. But the other thing that they can do is they can start setting fierce, defensible boundaries. And we say that all the time. It's easy to say it. It's way harder to do it, right? Anyone on here on the internet can say, oh, set better boundaries. I remember being on that side and I'd hear this and like, fuck you. Like, what are you talking about? You're not my position. You don't know what I'm talking about or dealing with. So it's easy. It's easy for someone to say set stronger boundaries. It's way harder to do it, right? But what does a better boundary look like or sound like? Well, I'll set that up for my next video. My next video will be about boundaries, right? How we do it, how we set it. I mean, I've done it before, but that was like 300 videos ago, so I think I can repeat myself a little bit. But yeah, boundaries in the sense of, if this situation happens, I'm going to do that action. And you can bet the bank on it. This is a commitment to you, it's a commitment to myself, and it's a commitment to my children. If this thing happens, I'm going to do that. Which means you got to do some homework ahead of time in a place where you're regulated and able to, you're not being overwhelmed by emotions or emotional dysregulation, I guess. So you got to do some homework to figure out what are the consequences. What are the ultimatums? Boundaries, ultimatums, same thing, right? There's not really a difference. It is, in a specific situation, I'm going to do a thing. So I'll talk more about it in the next video. So if you get really good at boundaries, which is a lot of practice, a lot of work, you have to increase your skill pretty extremely in that one domain. But the thing is, that skill will benefit all aspects of your life here and forward. So it doesn't just help you with this, it helps you with everything afterwards. So it's kind of worth investing in. So you get really good at boundaries, and then you come up to this person who's controlling, manipulative, whatever, and you just stop playing their game. You stop consenting. And you know what happens? They rage out, almost always. And if raging out means unsafety, you GTFO. If you establishing a boundary for your well-being and mental health causes the other person to rage out in a way that causes danger to anyone, that's a red flag of epic proportions. Time to get out right now. And the thing is, you will have the whole tribe will be on your side. That person crossed the line, because guess what? We make fucking movies about them crossing the line and the whole tribe shaming them, and they're basically the villain, right? You draw the boundary in a clear and compassionate, oddly enough, it is strangely compassionate, a clear, regulated, compassionate way. And if they rage out in such a way that they cross lines, they now look like a villain from the TV show. And everyone's going to see that. And they will come to your side and say, we need to get you away from that villain, right? Now, are they truly a villain? There's a lot going on there. We don't need to worry about that. That's their life, their business, their path. It's not it's not your burden to carry at all. So those are just some thoughts. Connection, controlling parents, abusive relationships. I see the connection, and I hope after this video, other people are like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. I've seen it in my own life or someone around me, right? Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you all for listening. Peace.